You're listening to Sound Side. I'm Libby Denkman. Haven't heard about Seattle's comprehensive plan recently? Well, the city council is supposed to be working on it, but the process is on hold because of appeals. Just to catch you up, the comprehensive plan is a set of zoning changes that are supposed to be a blueprint for future growth. It's required by state law. And the comp plan usually means allowing more housing density. One thing this current iteration, the proposed comp plan, would do is change zoning laws to allow for 6-story buildings in neighborhood centers across the city. It's just one example of the changes. The appeals that are currently putting the plan on hold are based on the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. City Councilmember Eddie Lin, who chairs the Land Use and Sustainability Committee, says that the current phase of the comprehensive plan will be delayed into late 2026 or possibly next year because of these challenges. He's proposed a change that's working its way through City Council. It would limit these types of appeals. And Councilmember Lin is here with me now to discuss. Councilmember Eddie Lin, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Libby. Very excited to weigh into this interesting for me topic. Hopefully it's interesting for your listeners.
We might get in the weeds, but you know what? We're talking about zoning changes, so it's unavoidable, right?
Yeah.
So I read your op-ed in the Seattle Times, and you're basically making a counterintuitive argument for some people, I think, because you're arguing that limiting Environmental Protection Act appeals is actually the pro-environmental move here. So I guess first, could you kind of summarize what this legislation would do? And then we'll talk about, that argument.
Yeah, and I'd like to just talk about what the state environmental, and it's called the State Environmental Policy Act. People often call it the State Environmental Protection Act. And it is the whole point of it is to do an environmental analysis before we make certain decisions. And so we started that process in 2022. We did 3 years of basically environmental analysis. And what that means is it's much broader than a lot of people think. It's not just things like air quality or water quality. It is also things like impacts to traffic, impacts to businesses, historic resources. And under our current rules, we allow any member of the public, businesses, to appeal that study or and to say, hey, you haven't looked at this enough. You should do more studies. That happens routinely. Under our current rules, City Council cannot take action until that whole process is complete. And so that's why we have this delay. What we have seen is we actually have some of the strongest environmental protections in the country. There's a recent study that despite the fact that our region has grown 34% over the past couple decades, Lake Washington is a lot cleaner. And that is because our new rules that basically require new multifamily housing is much cleaner, greener than our existing housing stock. We have more robust, basically, stormwater management rules. So what we have seen is that new growth actually can be environmentally friendly. It allows us to clean up some of our contaminated sites in the city if we redevelop. So that's what I'm proposing, is that we know that new multifamily housing, dense, walkable neighborhoods is good for the environment, it's good for our climate emissions, and it allows us to have a greener city.
So right now, there are 2 appeals that are holding up the comprehensive plan. And to be clear, your change is not going to remove those appeals. This would be for future actions, right?
It's a little bit unclear
okay.
based on we are still figuring out exactly what would happen with the current appeals, whether those would proceed or not. So we'll have a more firm answer on that before Tuesday.
Got it. So tell me what the consequences are of the comp plan being held up in this way.
Well, what it means is, so what happened last year is we adopted the comprehensive plan, and that's because there was a little bit of a legal, it was a tricky situation where we actually did move to dismiss the appeal based on new state law that basically limits these types of appeals. It was dismissed. That allowed us to move ahead with the comprehensive plan. That allowed us to meet the deadline, the state deadline, to do zoning changes in neighborhood residential, the areas of the city that used to be single family neighborhoods. So House Bill 1110 required that we allow basically 4 units of housing or potentially up to 6 throughout the city. We were able to do that because that appeal was dismissed. That appeal was further appealed to Superior Court and then the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals said, hey, the city has code that allows these appeals. You should allow this appeal based on your own code. Our code, there are many other jurisdictions that do not allow these types of appeals. King County, Bellevue. And so to me, it's important for us to be able to continue the work of city government, which is to continue to do the rest of our necessary zoning. Right now, we did the zoning for neighborhood residential. We have not done zoning for the rest of the city that aligns with our comprehensive plan. That's critical work that we need to do. And right now we're on hold.
So one of the appeals that we're talking about here, it concerns tree loss and the impact of more runoff on the Puget Sound and life in the Puget Sound. There's another group that claims that previous environmental assessments didn't properly consider the impacts of the comp plan on historic building and traffic. In your Seattle Times piece, you say, quote, SEPA has historically been used by a small number of businesses and neighborhood activists to protect the status quo and their special interests and slow government down. Now, I know you were speaking generally there, but is that what you're arguing these groups right now at these appeals are doing? Are they trying to slow government down because of basically protecting the status quo?
Whether that's the intent or not, that is the impact. There was another op-ed in Seattle Times. We had one. There was one from a community member. The community member talked about a couple projects from, I-90 in the 1970s, Sound Transit expansion, and talked about the environmental review that occurred for those projects. Now, I want to clarify that our legislation does not apply to project-based environmental review. It only applies to legislation. So those projects are different, though those could that environmental review would still happen, including appeals. And also those were under the federal National Environmental Policy Act, and so any time of federal review would still continue. But I think what was interesting about the opposing op-ed was it talked about that this is a tool that gives certain people leverage and it forces the government to the negotiating table with these groups that file these appeals. And that's exactly right. I have filed these types of appeals in my prior practice as a lawyer. I have seen the power of this legal tool to basically, force government to the table. And the question is, in a democracy where we have 9 elected city council members who are supposed to represent 800,000 people, do we want to force government to the negotiating table to give every single business, every single person in the city that tool to slow us down, to give them leverage? Because we know that historically, the people that are most likely to take advantage of this tool are the ones that have the resources, the lawyers, and the sort of access to information to use this. And so for me, it's anti-democratic and it's just bureaucracy and not democracy.
I want to note for listeners that we are going to be inviting some of the folks who are behind the appeals on to kind of respond. So you're going to get a chance to hear the other side pretty soon on Soundside. Councilmember, so what if your proposal to change the way that people can appeal these planning ordinances goes forward and the pendulum shifts the other way? And, right now, what you believe is exploitation of SEPA review actually then turns into like unfettered development. Are there safeguards in place to make sure that a more relaxed process of approving buildings will be environmentally friendly?
Well, first of all, I want to make clear that the SEPA process, and it's really a procedural rule, does not change any of our environmental rules. And so this appellate process, even if you go to the hearing examiner, at the end of the day, what you get is more studies. You don't get any changes to any rule. So we have the same, the way you affect change in our environmental codes, whether that's things like our stormwater code, our energy code, our tree code, Those are all legislative decisions, and there are pros and cons to all of this. And so at the end of the day, if people want to fight for stronger tree protection codes, the way to do that is to lobby your electeds. The way to do that is to get involved in elections. The hearing examiner is not a place to actually change policy. And, it is not a place where negotiations happen. It's not a place where compromise happen. It's not a place where solutions happen. And so I would prefer for us as a city to engage with the hard work of, having our tree folks work with our developers. Let's find solutions to improve water quality further. Again, we have seen improvements in our water quality in Lake Washington despite our growth. We can do more, and I want to work on that. We can't work on that because that doesn't happen when we go to the hearing examiner.
So where does your proposal stand right now at the city council? This proposal to change how SEPA review works. What's the status of it? What are next steps?
The next steps is it comes before full council on Tuesday. So it passed out of our land use committee last Wednesday. And so, yeah, I encourage any member of the public who's interested to, send us an email, come testify, come listen to the dialogue. This is an important community conversation, so I really appreciate you covering it. Obviously, there's strong opinions on both sides of the issue, and I think it's good for us to have this debate and dialogue.
Anything else you want to add?
Just, I think this dialogue that we're talking about, this is democracy in action. Us having debates sort of out in community, us having debates in council chambers, right? And so that's what I'm excited about, is for us to, talk about what's our vision for our city and how we can grow, how we can have affordable housing and a clean, green city. And again, in my opinion, that doesn't happen at the hearing examiner appeal process. That happens in chambers. That happens out in community. And that's what I want to continue to engage with.
Seattle City Councilmember Eddie Lin is the chair of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee and represents District 2 on the council. Councilmember, thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.